Play, Watch, Listen is officially supported by Patreon. Patreon helps us pay artists, do more fun, creative stuff, and lets me give you ad-free versions of the show. So if you want to support Play, Watch, Listen, check out the link in the description.
So my first movie was a shitty movie called Striking Range with one Lou Diamond Phillips.
Tell us that story.
Yeah. Well, did you have any interesting stories happen with him?
Did you used to smoke?
I used to smoke, and so I saw him. So I got an audition for. I'm sure I've told this story, but fuck it, I don't care. I got an audition for
As
this.
we established earlier, off camera, unrelated to this, many good things started by going fuck it and just
True story.
Caution to
Fuck
the wind.
it. Now we have content. I got an audition for this Western, and then my agent called and said they want you in Albuquerque, New Mexico on Wednesday. This is like Monday or something. And for a callback. And I was like, they're going to fly me out to New Mexico? She goes, oh, no. No. You have to go on your own dime. And I did not have enough money in my account to cover that flight. So at the time I was working at this church, Bo Chansey was my boss, and he was like, I got you. And so he paid for my flight, and I flew out to New Mexico, and I went in for my audition, and they were like pulling the trigger on people like right there. They're like, get this person into wardrobe right now. And so I was waiting for my chance for them to go, do you want me to get into wardrobe? They're like, no, thank you very much. And so I was like, okay. And like a week later, I get a call from my agent. She goes, hey, they just have one question. It's between you and another guy in New York, and they want to know, can you ride a horse?
Are you guys already recording?
Oh yeah,
We're recording. We're in it. This is it. This is the show. We're in there.
I was like,
He said, can you ride a horse? And I went, this is good content.
this is good
I
content.
need to make sure I
This is
can
how we
record
got
this.
here. Was I jokingly asked Troy if he could ride a horse, and he started telling the story, and I
Horse.
said, "Did I not say, Troy? This is content. Turn on.
Softball.
You've
there.
trained this into us. We can spot when we're doing a content."
So
Troy
like,
continues to do a content.
can you ride a horse? I was like, ma'am, I'm from Texas. What do you think? And she goes, I apologize. Totally
That's not a
understood.
yes.
Wow.
That's not a yes. So technically I didn't lie, because technically I could not ride a horse.
You
I'd
didn't
never done
answer
a
the
horse
question.
in my entire life, but I didn't answer. I just let the lingering doubt, I let her fill in the gaps. So it's one of my, I love this story
I
because
feel like you haven't told this here.
I tell it like
this is
in
new to
every
the podcast.
con.
This is exclusive new content we're doing.
Yeah.
This is-
So I get on set, and I took one class before I had to fly. I get the gig. They're like, you need to be out in New Mexico in like 2 weeks, whatever. So I took one riding class, and so I'm out on set.
Of course,
and it's-
writing class is what you actually took, and it was not useful for the horseback
Yeah,
riding.
there was no horses. I was like, this is interesting. And so I get out there, and there's like, it's everybody. It's the entire cast. So it's like Carl Urban, Steve Zahn, Ryan Merriman, all these guys. And everybody's up on their horse, and everybody feels incredibly comfortable. And then there's me. And one of the vaqueros, one of the wranglers, came up to me. His name Dutch. And he looks at me and leans across the saddle.
Of course he is.
I
Well,
know.
else would he
Checks
called?
out, yeah.
That's amazing.
I could like pan up from the saddlebags to his face, and it was the same consistency. It was just like this guy had been out in the sun his entire life. And he looks at me and he goes, how good of a writer are you? And I went, he goes, don't fucking lie to me, because we're going to find out in about 10 seconds. And I said, I could use some help. He goes, okay. They had me on Old Mexico. That was the name of my horse. And I found out that why they called him Old Mexico is because he had a lot of gas. And Old Mexico wanted to be at the front of the line. So when we're walking, everything's fine. But the second that we all kicked into a little bit of a lope, as Tony Cobb, our stunt coordinator, said, my horse goes taking off, and I'm just flopping around trying to hold on to it. And everybody had to stop. And the guy goes, whoa, 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 hold on. And this guy, Reed Steele, that was his name, Reed Steele.
Wow.
He
Clearly
goes,
a porn star. There's
I'm
no
gonna-
other.
he goes,
no
"I'm
other
gonna
Or a
take Troy."
superhero.
Or a superhero,
Yeah.
yeah.
This isn't my day job, by the way. My day job. I make films. So he goes, I'm going to take Troy off to the side, and I went to remedial cowboy camp and learned how to ride a pony. And I thought that I was fired. And I came back, and everyone was proud of me. And I rode a horse for the movie, and I fell in love with riding horses. And I want to get Traveler on a horse. This is typically around 4 is the age where they'll start teaching kids.
Here's the
I wanna
problem,
get them on a
though.
horse.
You teach kids to like horses, they will need you to buy them one. I was a horse
It's
girl.
an expensive hobby.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
And if you get your kid into horses, the asking for a horse won't end until about 15.
But you competed, right? Did you do like hunter jumper and dressage and shit like that?
No,
or-
we did cattle herding at like a local.
Oh, you were
station.
like Western style.
Yeah, it was sick.
Oh shit.
Yeah, we'd like camp out because sometimes it would take 2 days. It was awesome. It's really cool. But I never got the horse because my family didn't have any money.
You grew up in the Guy Pearce movies that Guy Pearce makes back when he goes back to Australia to do independent films. That's basically what it
Isn't
was.
that blasphemous to bring up to Australian people that movie?
I think there's like 10 movies that fit the bill I just described there. Guy Pearce has done a lot of like Australian westerns.
It's true. Yeah, don't get your kid into horses. That's all I'm saying. It's cool.
I've missed you all.
I've missed you as well.
Yeah, we've had
it feels like ages since we spoke last.
We've had a bit of a
been an
arrhythmia
age.
with this show, it seems.
How was your prom, Austin?
My prom? I got a very lovely corsage. We did some staircase photos.
You know what I meant.
Yeah, it was fucking amazing. I appreciate
Do you want to
your
give the people
accommodation.
the context of what
catch
it was?
us up. I'm eating
So,
my lunch. Forgive me.
I'll just buy time for Troy here.
You were at the proms, weren't you? Which any
proms.
non-Brits watching, that's a big fucking deal. Like
I
that's
don't know
a
what that
genuinely massive
is.
cultural thing here.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, the proms is a thing that's put on by the BBC, and it's a several week long festival at Royal Albert Hall, which is one of the main concert venues in London for like big shows. And it's been going for, I don't remember when it first started, but this was, I think
It might be a century, like definitely decades. Like
Wow.
the proms have been around as long as
It's
they've
definitely
their
a-
institution. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, and one of the things that's cool about it is, it's supposed to be a kind of, like first off, they put it on TV, so they broadcast all the concerts, so it's meant to reach the widest possible audience. They also, the Royal Albert Hall has big wraparound seats and a floor seating, and they get rid of all the floor seating and make it standing room and do really low cost tickets so people can bring their families, people can, it's really, it's meant to encourage, like, if you've never been to any kind of classical music or anything like that, this is the one to go to. That's kind of the vibe of it.
128 years.
128
Wow.
years.
That's what I'm saying. It's like that's incredible achievement.
Like the
man.
Queen
Is that your
typically
first
will
time
go to
being in
one of the
proms?
shows.
Like, I mean,
It's my first
the
time.
Royal Albert Hall won't have existed much longer than that because obviously it's named after Albert, who's
Prince Albert in a can.
That's actually,
Prince
they have
Albert.
signs.
So literally from the Victorian era because he was married to her. So like,
It's
that's,
not this. It's
Yeah,
not-
that's
Victorian era.
Victorian
It's
era.
actually
Like,
celebrating. I think it's celebrating 150 years this year.
oh, is it really?
Hall.
Oh, then. Oh, that was
then
sorry.
fuck it,
That was the
never
first time. Why? Okay. Oh, the instant.
You
the
were there for
Googles
150?
introduced
No.
it, But yeah.
To be clear, the hall is
hall.
celebrating.
Oh, the
150
hall has
years.
existed that long. Yeah, so it's only started like a couple of decades after it opened. That's amazing. Jesus, that's incredible. But yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
an
and so-
massive British institution. This is really impressive.
Yeah,
this
and
would
they
be
put it
like
on
this would
the,
be like
um,
Austin saying like, yeah, they played a bit of Journey at the Super Bowl. It's no big deal. It's a similar.
Yeah,
thing.
the thing that was really exciting was that the proms has tended to be a kind of who's who in the classical music world. You'll
Mm-hmm.
have your Yo-Yo Ma types who come and perform because it's like every day for weeks.
You got
And-
your Yo-Yo Ma's. You got
It's a
your
real festival,
Pavarotttis. You got your...
Exactly.
You got two of the three tenors. Yeah.
So they announced a few months ago that they were going to be doing the first ever video game music show at the proms. And I saw the announcement publicly like everybody else, so I just assumed that whatever, like by the time they announce things, it's kind of like the video game industry. By the time they announce it, most of the decisions will have been made about all the goings on under the hood and behind the scenes. To my surprise, like a month or two after they announced it, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we'd love to include Journey on the show. Do you have sheet music that you could send our way?" And so I have, over the last 10 years since Journey came out, I have sheet music that was made for like standard orchestra performance, because a full orchestra can be as few as 40 or 50 people and still kind of qualify for full orchestra, or it can be this gargantuan like Mahler orchestra of 120 people or more. But a normal orchestra, like if the like, trying to think of a good example, if the Sacramento Symphony were to reach out and say, we're doing a show, do you have sheet music we could take a look at for our show? They're probably not going to be putting on some gargantuan spectacle. It's going to be like a normal kind of rank and file meat and potatoes. So do you have different
sheets that you would send based on the size of the orchestra?
Yeah.
Wow.
You have to make different versions because if your sheet music is calling for instruments that they won't be using, then obviously something's got to be changed, and there's some kind of friction involved in that. And so years ago, I prepared a kind of like, here is the generic 60-ish piece orchestra. You could play it with more people theoretically, but like more if strings is where you end up with the majority of your complement anyway, and more strings is pretty much always welcome. But what we would refer to it as wins by two, which means like 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, and that usually is accompanied by...
It's a great Chicago record, by the way.
Wins by 2. And then 4 French horns, 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, 1 tuba. That's like that's the part that scales the most aggressively.
Why is it always welcome to have more strings?
Because strings balance like a hive mind. And so if you have 14 first violins or if you have 18 first violins, your orchestra has moved by 4 people. That's a big difference from 4 extra trumpets. Like if you went from 3 to 7 trumpets, that would be a massive, because they're so loud. Individual violins, violas, cello, they're really not very loud.
Okay.
So that's why it's all about like a 60-piece orchestra, 45 of those are going to be the strings.
Gotcha.
And so you could picture it. When you picture an orchestra, it's all those violins, and then the back would be, 2 flutes, 2 oboes. So anyway, the standard kind of generic symphony orchestra, what we call wins by 2, and that also means any weird, like unusual instruments, they might do what we call standard doublings, which means the second flute can also play piccolo, the second oboe would play English horn, the second clarinet would play bass clarinet, and maybe the second bassoon would play contrabassoon. But that's it. Well, so I made like a conservative orchestration of Journey years ago because I was getting asked by like normal orchestras that were not doing big gala events, but just having like a normal show, if they could have some of the sheet music. And so, for example, like when you need, like Journey calls for cello solos that were played by Tina Guo in the original recording. If I wrote the score so that like the first chair cello can play those solos and then kind of join the rest of the section, so they don't have to hire an additional musician for this. Like it's those kinds of accommodations.
Yeah.
It all sounds very nitty gritty, but if you don't do it,
super interesting.
They can't perform it.
Yeah.
They literally will go, well, this is going to price us out. So I sent them my generic, like, well, here's the standard suite that people tend to do, which is nascence into apotheosis into I Was Born for This. I Was Born for This requires a singer. It's sort of the song at the end of it plays over the ending credits of the game. So they were like, they looked at it and they went, this is the prom. It was so funny to get this very polite email from the person. It was the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra playing. And they sent me this email that would go, this is all well and good. We're going to have a bigger orchestra than this. Do you happen to have like other charts? And it was like, well, I just so happened to have released a 10th anniversary edition that was recorded with a 95-piece orchestra. How about you take a look at this? But then the funny thing was they said, we won't have any singers though. So I said, well, how about we do the middle bit it's called Road of Trials. That's the surfing section, which is a very energetic and fun kind of middle portion. And so I sent them that from this, Traveler Symphony. And so that's what they did. And it ended up being the largest section of the whole show. It was like most of the pieces were like, here's a 5-minute, like Zelda or whatever. And they did like over 15 minutes from Journey.
5-minute Zelda or whatever.
There was like
Zelda. Move along.
I want to point out something.
It was
they
very
just played
surreal.
da 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 da.
I want to point out something.
It was very surreal. I don't want to sound cavalier about it because it was like I flew myself to London for 24 hours just to go to the show because it was such a bucket list. Like everyone kept going, how long you been in town? And I was like, I've been in town for 3 hours.
One day. Yeah, that's awesome.
And like literally landed, noonish before the show and was out noonish the following day.
May I point something out for all of our,
which was yesterday.
Whether you be on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you consume your podcast.
But not if you're on iTunes. Please switch off if you're on iTunes for a moment.
At this time, if you're listening on iTunes,
Flip
that was an Austin Wintry story that was uninterrupted.
He
Mostly.
was technically
Mostly.
still talking
Back
until
the
you
fuck
interrupted
off.
him at the end.
No, he finished the story. And at a great button, narratively, that was the end of it. And I specifically waited. I also, as a serious follow-up with what's happening in the news right now, I want to know, specifically from you, Alanah, where the fuck is the chicken nugget? Because it's gone. And it's kind of throwing me
What's
off.
happening in the news?
God, that was a great setup.
The chicken nugget is
think
not there. I mean, it'd be off camera anyway, but actually it is in another room.
No, it's always on camera.
I know,
I
but
moved the camera.
She's adjusted her camera.
I understand
It's
that
probably
you
something a
moved
bit
the
of
camera.
mess she's trying not to call attention to over there. And she's
No,
therefore
it's
making
actually
choice.
just that the
And you're
camera
making
keeps
things
shifting that way, and then it keeps like showing outside, and I'd prefer it didn't do
okay.
that.
Makes sense.
I don't know why it won't just. I wish it could just be forward, but if I try and shift it this way, it'll just go whoop. So
I feel like Troy has unlocked an interesting piece of information. So the nugget moves around your home.
the nugget has
in the
now
night while
moved.
she sleeps.
It's not a static
It's an
object.
autonomous
It's-
nugget.
Yeah,
I have no say in where it shows up each morning.
Is that
It's a
is that
quest.
big?
I moved the
This is
nugget.
interesting.
Why did I move the nugget? Oh, my dad's coming to visit, and I put
Oh,
it.
well, of
He doesn't
course.
like
in-
chicken nuggets.
I
He doesn't
put,
like
no, I
chicken
put it
nuggets.
Get rid of
in the
that.
guest bedroom because I thought that he
Wait,
would find
Alanah,
it
you saying to be
entertaining.
doing well
For
yourself?
him.
Is that a chicken nugget in the floor? No, Dad.
No, my dad is
Where-
very
where's he
Australian.
from?
I
Gonna have a
didn't, like, I
chicken
didn't like
nugget.
that. I wasn't a fan of that.
That's a spot-on rendition of your dad.
He's very Australian. I sometimes have to
He
translate
said he
for
was going
him.
to take me to dinner when he was in town too. By the way,
My dad?
You
absolutely.
guys talk when the
He's
rest of
useless.
us
We
are
have a
not
total
around.
separate
I've said this
thread.
before. He wouldn't even know how to do dinner in LA. The concept would confuse
No. He
the
left it
man.
to me to choose the restaurant.
Oh, then
but-
you're fine. Yeah, then you're fine. I have to do everything. We're going to
Troy,
Alaska.
make sure you get a good restaurant.
Sounds more Kiwi, but I'm not going to
I'm-
insult
I'm
you. You
ima-
are
I'm
now.
Your father
imagining
is from
he's
New
like
Zealand. You
a-
should know this.
I'm imagining he's more of a Broden from Auntie Donna. Is that more ways?
Sorry,
Hey,
Good
little one, how's
pressure.
it going? He's got high energy when he talks, and he he does this little dad laugh.
Oh, that's awesome.
I asked him
Nice.
what his t-shirt size was, and he said M for muscles.
I love your dad already. Fuck.
I sounds good. Yeah. Yeah.
Take me to proms.
And I was like, does that mean medium? And he said, no, muscles. Piece of shit.
Nice.
Excited for him to visit. But I did want to ask, speaking of the news, I assume the answer to this is going to be no.
I had no chicken nugget.
Has anybody seen Nope?
I
Not
haven't.
yet.
No, nearly.
so.
Soon.
Great topic.
So, didn't think so.
Is
Great
it
topic.
awesome? Is it awesome? Is it up to the standard of the? Because his stuff has been so good.
Well, I think Get
Ooh.
Out is top 10 brilliant, fantastic film.
Totally.
I think
Why?
Us is okay.
Why is Get Out top 10 brilliant?
I think the
Oh, it's amazing.
layers
It won
of
an Oscar.
Oh, no, I'm not saying
Because
it's
it
not.
won
I'm
an
I'm
Oscar.
asking you why you think it is.
the way that movie layers tension and perfectly coexists with comedy, I think is pretty unique in the way that they nail that. Also, like that exploration of that particular theme is not something that I've ever seen before, and I feel like they executed on it very well. Or he executed on it very well. Us, I found to be scary, but I felt like the theme didn't really hold itself together as well as I would have liked. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but I didn't.
I was going to say it was less
coherent.
cohesive. It didn't feel as
Yeah.
it didn't feel as focused as
It
Get
could be
Out
like
was,
a
but
you got
still
to ask
excellent.
questions type thing, and sure, but I think if you ask a few too many questions, then it falls apart. Like,
Both of
how did
those
they get
movies-
the same clothes? Like, there's just
Worth-
a.
Calling out that both those films are shot so beautifully
Yeah.
and look so like, especially all the like mirror funhouse stuff.
Yeah.
In Us were so vivid and like amazing looking, and of course, Michael Abels, a composer who Jordan Peele found on YouTube,
Really?
wrote amazing scores for both of those.
Wow.
Both of those movies, and he's a really, really good dude. He has spent his whole career in the more academic side of music. He wrote operas and symphonies. Never done a film score until Get Out,
Wow.
and it like immediately threw him into the sort of upper echelon of film after that.
I'm
and
not
he's
sure
just
who the
nicest
composer
guy.
for Nope was, but
It's also him. I don't think Abels will ever let go of him.
gotcha.
How do you
So
like
Nope-
Nope, Alanah?
I liked it. It's not horror, and I think that the trailer and I think the trailer really fucked that up. It makes
It's
you
very
think it's
sci-fi,
going
is
to
my
be horror. It's
understanding.
very sci-fi. So
Okay.
it's an action-y, not really, I guess sci-fi movie. I found it extremely entertaining. I was always entertained. It's one of those movies where when I was watching it, it was all I was thinking about. You know, I never strayed a thought, but it didn't leave me with anything either. Which I think is just maybe an expectation that's on Jordan Peele now, which isn't necessarily fair. But I do feel like the marketing was wrong. So I did really enjoy it, but I'm like, yeah, it was a good fun movie. That's kind of it.
Do you think that that's a result of the studio, or do you think where do you think that comes from? We talked about marketing a lot, especially for this, but my
guess is that that's what they think Jordan Peele's audience wants, and thus think that's how they have to sell the film. And there's like 1-2 things in it that I would consider to be horrific, but it's definitely not a horror film. You're not scared. It's what
would you call Alien?
Alien's a horror. We're back to this again.
It's
Wasn't this the last episode?
Yeah, this is it. It's more. I think Alien's more of a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
Of unrequited love.
No, it's a thriller.
Yeah, the Xeno just wanted love the whole time.
Story, right? Yeah.
Hello, my baby. Hello. Oh, it's like I'm thinking of Spaceballs.
I would recommend Nope, and I do have friends who really, really loved it. Yeah, I was just like, I was entertained. It was good. Cool.
Nice.
The film is cool. Some
There's
really good performances.
I felt similar. I watched Everything Everywhere All at Once recently, and I was like, this is a really entertaining movie. Like, I remember a lot of people got madly excited about it. I thought it was really good, but similarly kind of, I didn't.
What makes it
click for me
incredible
the way
to
it
you?
does for everyone, I think.
Like, what's incredible
feel
about it?
like that. Have you seen it?
No.
Without spoiling anything. Well, I can say this without spoiling anything. I feel like that movie to me so clearly executes on exactly what its vision is, while still being very funny and very heartfelt, that it seems like it hasn't been tampered with by any execs anywhere at all, to the extent that it's a miracle that it got made, because it's so fucking weird. Like, it's a very bizarre movie that's core theme is really be nice. Like, that's what the movie's about, really. And for that to be such a simple message that's blown up into this ridiculous film, and to still fully execute on that, I was just blown away by it.
Interesting.
There are. That's such a. I totally agree. That's a really good description of it. It felt like a movie that was allowed to pitch a very specific and hyper novel, hyper stylized approach to a very otherwise simple concept with no interference. There's one shot I remember where it's basically just this rapid fire montage of like 50 million iterations of her face. And I remember thinking like just the production design and makeup and
also
all that,
it was like
just to get that 5-second shot.
It was 5 VFX size, I think, or something like some ridiculously small VFX on that. It's absolutely amazing. It might have been 10. I might be exaggerating, but no, I really enjoyed it. I think I just suffered from hearing it's the best movie ever for like a month before I watched it.
I also had that though, and
it lived up to it for you. That's awesome.
That movie, cool. It's a shame. I really think it's one of the best movies ever made. Like, I watched it and I wanted to cry just because I was so overwhelmed by the cohesion. I don't know. It had
my
such a
problem
big
is I
impact on
cry
me.
at every movie, so that's
I never cry.
not a measure for me. Oh, I weep. I weep at like bad movies as well. Like anything, like all I need is like a sting
Transformers.
of a chord while someone looks moody. Honestly, I think I might have cried at Bumblebee. I think Bumblebee got me, genuinely.
Can I ask a question?
Maybe not the other ones.
We may have talked about this before. Do you think that you said it's one of the greatest movies ever made?
Yeah, which, I would think that it is, yeah. And I'm not alone on that. Filmmakers have said that about it too.
Right. I think we may have talked about this before.
Very much the Citizen Kane of movies.
Perfect example. So if it's... I got it. Do you think that the greatest whatever ages out? Or do you think that it... No. I mean, I still think The Godfather is one of the greatest.
That's what I was going to say. The Godfather. It doesn't age out.
Oh my god, guys! I watched the show and it's incredible. Thank you.
Is it?
I really enjoyed it.
I was so worried.
I don't want to derail this. I just wanted to throw that in.
Why?
I went away and burnt a weekend binging that show after we talked last.
I just watched Chinatown, and it was one of those movies where I thought I've seen this before, and I was like, I've never seen this before. Holy shit! Why did you think that it was going to be bad? Because I feel like there's this weird undercurrent of people that are like...
To be clear, we're talking about The Offer.
We're talking about The Offer.
We're not talking past each other.
I know.
Okay.
I expected it to be bad because I'm at a point where anything that's a spin-off of something I expect to be bad, especially if it's...
it's definitely
it has to be a
hey,
spin-off,
we're
doesn't it?
Paramount, and it's very like there is definitely like a product placey vibe to it. It was definitely made because Paramount had all the rights to that and realized they could have their logo in 50% of the show on screen.
Well,
talking
yeah,
about how
and
wonderful
just
their history
the,
is.
the
It's awesome, but it's definitely a part.
This is a spicy take. I just feel like the space we're in right now with streaming services competing with each other I don't want to say this across the board because there are a lot of things that I could argue against it with, but has led to a lot of grabbing at IP in order to make a series, in order to make people subscribe, and not that much consideration of quality.
Oh, dude.
I think that's fair.
Let this assuage that fear. The quality of this
That may be true, but not apply to this show.
Sure, yeah.
That's
I'm not saying
true,
that's but specifically for this, it didn't feel that way at all. We're 50 years of the movie, and it's worthy of. Oh my God, what was that? It's worthy of retreading that ground. And there's still, as much as I know about that movie, as much as I know about the people that were in charge of it, and there's stories that I'd never heard, never knew.
Set?
It's about the making of The Godfather. So it's
from-
during
it's
the
from,
making of it.
It's from the writing. We're definitely going to redo the podcast here, but yeah, it's from it's from. I mean,
Starts with the novel of Mario
Puzo.
Puzo.
Starting the novel through to the release. I kind of was in the same place as you, Alanah. I was like, I feel like I've seen that, not the story of The Godfather, but I've seen that kind of. I think from the way it was marketed and the way it was sold was very much like Entourage with a sepia filter. That was kind of what my view of what that show was.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I expected it to be for some reason, about when the movie came out, like the cultural impact or whatever. But I guess it goes way
and
further
they
back
touch
than
on that.
I think it's more of how the
about
culture impacted it.
Yeah.
And also
That's true
just
as
the
well.
insanity that it is to make a film.
I think that's what
so
really,
inspirational.
That's what I captured. I remember on the show I said I compared it to Get Shorty, the TV show of Get Shorty rather than the film. I said, like, is it like Get Shorty? I think you guys said, no, it's not, or whatever. I thought, for me, it clicked in exactly the same way as that show did. Anyone who's watching this who's not seen the Get Shorty TV show, my God,
No idea what that is.
Well, we can come back to that, but yeah, it's
right.
Get Shorty Get Shorty is a movie based on a book. It's what's his name? Guy who wrote Jackie Brown. Shit.
His name is Shit.
Did
that's
Tarantino not
unfortunate.
write Jackie Brown?
Tarantino did not
No,
write
the book
Jackie
it's
Brown.
based on. The book Jackie Brown's based on. I can't remember the name
Wait,
of the people
Tarantino
saying
didn't
the
write
context.
Jackie Brown.
Remember?
No. Well, it's an
Someone will
adaptation
figure it
of
out.
the book.
One of you will oracle it.
Get Shorty, so Get Shorty, the
Go to work,
movie, it's a John Travolta movie, and it's about like gangsters trying to make movies. The TV show
Sam Farina's in it.
is literally what if Breaking Bad meets Entourage. Like that was genuinely what I think the pitch was, and that sounds awful, but it was very entertaining. But the crucial thing, the
thought
reason
that
I
sounded
think
cool.
the reason I liked Get Shorty was at the time that was on TV, and I don't know if they're doing another series, but like it was on for like 3 seasons. The time where that was airing was the time that we were doing John Wick. So myself and my producer and one of my best friends, Ben, we were in Hollywood. Yeah, he's awesome. We were in Hollywood, kind of like the chances trying to do a Hollywood project. And that's
were the
what the show
entourage.
was about. We were the gangsters. Like, we were the guys who just rocked into town and were like, can we do this? And the great thing about Hollywood, I would say the best thing about Hollywood is when you come in, you can kind of fake it till you make it. And you're kind of, if you're someone who can put yourself out there and kind of get that job, you can get that job. And it was just a fascinating experience for the two of us going through that. And that's what I think this show also clicks. Like that first episode where it's like the guy rocking in and just like deciding to be in Hollywood and faking it till he made it. That was definitely something that resonates very much with my experience of, especially with John Wick, of just like walking into Hollywood and going, I'm going to convince all these people that I should make a game based on John Wick, and kind of getting away with it. And it was a period in my life which I guess
Did you watch
it resonates with that stuff.
Did you watch the little behind the scenes things that they would park at the end of each episode?
Oh
Because
my gosh!
every time
So
they had
good.
Al Ruddy on there, who's now
I don't
he's-
believe 50% of it, to be clear. Like there's a
no,
lot
no.
of stuff.
We've talked about
No,
this. We've
I
talked about
don't
this.
think it's all true. I don't think it's all true.
Well, there's certain things that
He solves every problem by being the clever man in the room, and it's written by him. I don't know if I believe it.
What do you mean? What are you
But
talking
it's a
about?
good story.
Al Ruddy?
It very much is a show that feels like it was written by the protagonist.
It is.
Like,
It's
I see
based
what you're
on.
saying.
It's based on. Didn't I believe he wrote a memoir that it is a direct adaptation of, and the guy who you know the guy, I'm forgetting his name. His last name is Bart. But the guy who's part of Bob Evans' crew, and
Yeah.
who like there's the scene where he's talking to Colin Hanks, and Colin Hanks is like, you know, no to this, no to that, whatever, I don't like it. And the guy's kind of going, you should know more about, like, that guy, the one who was there kind of trying to represent Bob Evans with him, you know, sort of not in the room. I'm trying to be vague here.
Sure.
That guy is still around, and I did read an article from him, to your point, Mike, where he goes, some of this is not quite how I remember it, for the record.
And that doesn't matter, to be honest. Most of the best history is made up. Like, I'm cool with it. Like, I'm fine with it. It's a very entertaining show. Like,
there's a lot of liberties that they take where, like,
they play with the timeline, don't they? They definitely put.
There's a little bit of timeline, but it's also.
But I think a lot of that's just to facilitate it being like they have 10 episodes to tell a big story.
No, and to be clear, no problem with it. I think it makes for
a better
story.
Yeah, on its face, it's still just something to enjoy. Whether or not the tension for the entire show comes from the fact of how close they come to calling it quits.
Over and over.
And you're making The Godfather. And what the problem is they don't know they're making The Godfather.
And that's what's brilliant about it, in fairness, is that, like...
It's a concept I've never thought of before. You can make The Godfather and not know that you're making the... I will say I have that experience
really well.
Now.
Most people think that they were making... Though it was going to sink Paramount. It was the worst thing you could ever do.
Including most of the creatives, right? Which is what
except for two people.
You never see in fiction.
Coppola and Ruddy. They were like,
but even they're doubting it. Even they've got like, so you very rarely do you see in fiction the creative process demonstrated as what it usually is, which is a bunch of people panicking that they're.
Well, can I ask, do any of you of any of the things that you've ever worked on? Do you ever know that what you're working on is good, or how often do you think what you're working on is good?
I've
noticed an inverse correlation personally. Like, if I really think something's excellent, then that's usually not the thing that's going to be it.
I've had both, where I was like, holy shit, I know that we're making something great. And also, we're making something that's dog shit. I know that.
And you were right in both cases.
Yeah, and then I've had the whole thing. We're making something that's not going to be good. That ends up being great, which humbles my opinion and helps hone that. Going, maybe your read is not the best one. And I've also had things where I think that we're making something great that ends up being bad. But like The Last of Us, we all knew was like, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, it'd be
we
hard
know this is going to be. We had no idea the scope of its success. But we knew when we were from the very time that I first heard the pitch, it was like, holy shit. A lot of that comes from the pedigree of Naughty Dog. I mean, they had Sony resources, a great creative team with decades of experience behind them. I knew that this was going to be the thing that they were throwing their whole weight behind.
I wonder how they felt when they made the first Uncharted. From the legacy they had at that point in time to making The Last of Us is very different.
Can you imagine, like, even just going for the photoreal thing was such a bold
Same thing as Last of Us. They were like, are you out of your mind?
Really?
Oh, because
I'd say that's more of a jump, though, right?
It was way big of a jump. It was never supposed to be a franchise. It was never called Uncharted. It was called Drake's Fortune.
I remember actually not long after shipping
Yeah, that's
Flow,
what I mean. Doing Uncharted. Sorry, Austin, go ahead. Just a side comment.
No worries. Go ahead.
Now we're interrupting.
Yeah, I was just saying, doing Uncharted again after the legacy they had at that point in time. I'm saying that to Last of Us is less of a jump. That makes sense. I wonder what that first Uncharted pitch meeting looked like.
It'd be interesting to find out. I mean, I know a little bit about it.
I can speak a little to that because we did Flow. Flow was a PS3 launch title. So we were working on it in 2006. And I remember not long after it came out. What year was Uncharted? Was it shortly?
2007.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because I was going to say...
a year after the launch.
It was in the 12 months, yeah.
I remember going up to the Bay Area to meet Clint Bajakian, former audio department star of LucasArts, who, among other things, wrote the score to the awesome Western first-person shooter Outlaws from LucasArts' heyday in the 90s. He was, at the time, working as one of the senior-level people in the Sony music department, and it's essentially the guy that hired me for Flow, for my first gig ever. And a guy I will be essentially forever grateful for to my dying breath. Really lovely guy, talented musician. And I remember I went up to just have a meeting to kind of debrief. I was like, we finished a game, and to me it was this gargantuan effort. For them, it was like, this is the smallest thing we've ever made. And he called me into his office, and I always told this story for years after as a seminal difference between the film and game industries, because I've always kind of bounced back and forth between the two. And I remember going to his office in the former headquarter in the Bay Area. Now they're in San Mateo, but wherever they were before was closer to the city. And he goes, dude, sit here. I want you to try this thing we're just about done with. And he put a controller in my hand, and I played Uncharted in his office before I think it was even announced. And his attitude was like, what do you think of this? I think it's pretty cool, right? It wasn't, I'm going to show you a revolutionary, there was no like grandstanding, but it was like this kind of cautious optimism. And again, he's the audio department. He's not, speaking on behalf of Naughty Dog even. It was just like, there was an enthusiasm. So before we even had our meeting, for probably 30 minutes, sat there just playing Uncharted. And I said, I can tell you, I've never shown up to meet like a director or a filmmaker, and they're like, you want to just like watch an episode of a show before our meeting or what? Like, that's never happened ever. But we sat there and played Uncharted for a good 30 minutes before we chatted. And he seemed to think, this is going to be good. This is really like, but not to the degree
that
of
hesitancy's the thing. That I think a healthy degree of kind of self-criticism and criticism of the work. Again, healthy, not like, not to the point where you're hating on yourself or you're feeling bad about it, but like healthily going, I think this is good, but I'm just going to do a bit more on it to make it a little bit better.
The reason I ask is because I have absolutely no concept if what I'm working on is good. And my brain can't, I don't even know. And I think that maybe, this is probably not the correct phrasing, but you'll still get my point. That it's like I'm looking at it almost more objectively. I'm looking at it as like, this piece goes here, and this piece goes here, and this piece goes here, and then the pieces come together, and are the pieces together? How are the pieces going? Oh, this piece needs this. I'm looking at it as a building block.
You're part of that process. Yeah, that makes sense. Is it your first big dev cycle as well? So you haven't got that experience necessarily. So you've not got that experience of seeing like how those blocks kind of coalesce towards the end.
I think so. I mean, there are definitely things other people make that I go, that's fucking cool. But like, of the whole piece, I almost can't. I don't know if that will change when it's out, but I feel like I don't even look at it as. I can't make myself an audience member, I think.
You'll get better. I think you'll get better from experience at seeing the potential. Like seeing, like, you won't ever look at your work and go, this is great. You will get better, I think, as you
that should be a warning sign.
Cycles. That's exactly. Those
in
people
anything I've ever
terrible
written, I've never done that. I've only ever been like, it's done, and that's good. But I've never been like, it's great. Whereas
you'll not get there, but I think you might get a better. You may get
Troy,
a better
you seem
sense
very
of where
troubled
things are
by
going.
this line of reasoning.
Yeah, I think that I'm wondering if there's a conflation between will it be received as good or is it inherently good? And I think there's nothing wrong.
I'm thinking about the reception at all, and that's been an interesting part of this process. Is I don't think about the reception whatsoever. I just think about my job. So I think about, this is what I need to get done, and here's what I know makes a quality thing, and here's what I need to do. I never think about it outside of. I don't have the time to do that. I just have to be I do my job.
Out of curiosity,
but if I may just kind of circle back, so like I'm trying to compare this to, like, we're in the middle of a scene and we go through this scene, we call cut, and everybody in the room goes, holy shit. Like, you feel it. You know that was the take. You know everybody was operating on their A game. Camera moved perfectly. The beats were hit. The notes were received.
If I was on set.
It's like,
what's the difference?
Troy, the difference is time. The difference is,
I don't have time to do that.
I would say it's the duration. Imagine if shooting a take took 3 years. During those 3 years, you're working the scene, you're making it happen. But
you also constantly
have that holistic view.
You constantly have a deadline.
There were scenes that we did. I'll bring this up, and this is not being disparaging to anyone on the team, nor anything else. But when we were making Avengers, I was like, this is going to be fucking awesome. Like, we're finally giving people the Marvel game that they want. The story that we had was incredible. The director that we had was incredible. The writing was incredible. The actors were fucking incredible. Look at the team that we had.
Great cast.
We had a great cast. So what I thought we were making was going to be something that was like, we're making something that's going to be clearly posited as games as service using the MCU and the way that we always did. It was going to be the continuation from the cinematic world into the games, and now you get to play Iron Man. Now you get to be all these characters. That's great. That's awesome. It's all about the execution, but there's scenes that we did. There's scenes that Nolan and I had that were like fucking awesome. Like, we all felt great about that. Shauna Sky, our director, who's now at Naughty Dog, was like, that's a great scene. So I understand what you're saying as far as objectively looking back at the entire project. No, you don't know. But I know that there's people that worked on that game specifically that were like, this is fucking cool. We did an amazing job using Miss Marvel. We did an incredible job of rethinking the character of Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and not just thinking of them as a person versus just a machine or a device.
I'd go as far as to say genuinely, and this is maybe a controversial opinion. Here we go. This is
spicy takes.
I'd go so far as to say good game, bad game, to an extent, doesn't matter to the point which is the vast majority of work, of individual jobs that are done on a game, are done well. I would say, in terms of if you think of games as a group of workers making the product of their work, they're all doing excellent work. I would say the vast majority of times where a game doesn't work, it's not because individuals are producing bad work. It's about that work not coming together correctly, which is honestly largely down to people in my job. So, like, I think there's a maybe that's a part of what you're talking about, Alanah, in the sense of like your work is good because you're a professional and you're skilled and you're talented, and your job is to be critical of your work up to the point where it's done and then hand it in and move on to the next task. So I would say you're doing great. Troy's doing great. Austin's doing great. I'm doing great, hopefully. The thing that defines whether a game is good or not from a player point of view is the meal rather than the ingredients.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not insecure. I don't think I'm doing badly. No. I just don't think about it. Like, keep making things.
Well, you don't have that necessarily. You don't have that view. You don't have that kind of satellite view of like what the game is.
No, I just think about doing my job. That's all. That's it. That's it. Get this done.
And I also think you're happy too, so that's all that matters.
Like, for sure. I love my job.
Then
I mean, a lot of games this is where I remember when Journey came out. That game company rolled the credits with no job titles. Everyone in the game was just, here's the alphabetical listing of the team.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
And that was a deliberate choice to not to make it about the game was a unit, and if you liked it, everyone on this list is why you liked it. And despite the fact that like Matt Nava was the art director, Genova was the sort of creative director, team leader, company director, Robin Haneke and Kelly Santiago were the two executive producers. Obviously I was doing music. Chris Bell started as like an assistant and became one of the designers, and
how did you feel about being credited that way?
Well, they did, because technically I was not an employee of that game company. I was credited as music by, along with the Sony department people.
Gotcha.
But it was the 12 or 13 that game company actual employees who were first credited, well before me, in their way. But if they had chosen, I would have felt quite honored to be sort of folded into their ranks as a symbolic gesture. But of course, I understood why contractually or on paper, it made sense to you were
probably brought in via Sony, right, rather than them.
Technically I was hired by Sony on that, but yeah.
So Austin, can I ask you the same kind of question, where at what point do you know that something that you're writing in terms of music is good? Because I think my thing is I look at it so technically that I'm not ready to think about it that way yet. I think that's what I'm doing. And
I remember when you were saying like they didn't know they were making The Godfather, I remembered a quote where Leonard Bernstein became extremely famous, and his father had discouraged him from pursuing the life of a musician when he was younger, because he felt like his father came from Eastern European Jewish roots where, he goes, a musician is the is the destitute violinist who plays at the wedding. I don't want that for my son. That was the attitude of Bernstein's father. And so then his son became like the most famous American musician, basically. And so one day they asked him, you know, how do you feel now about the fact that your son is, you know, has achieved so much? And he said, well, how was I supposed to know my son was going to grow up to become Leonard Bernstein? And I thought that was a perfect encapsulation of you never know when you're in it, even despite the signs. And I can tell you, in the case of Journey, there were two things that were kind of like noteworthy for me. I remember the night before the reviews dropped, the game was done. It had been done for a couple months, you know, going through the gold mastering process, blah, blah, blah. So I'd been sitting on it and been able to kind of process after all this work for years. And I remember thinking, I played through the game one last time before, like on my dev kit. And I go, I don't know if a single other person is going to like this game. I genuinely can't guess. I can't, because as soon as I go, oh yeah, this is definitely going to land, my mind will flood with things that probably won't work, or they'll go, it's pretentious, it's a walking simulator. Immediately, all those things that are going to pull it down flood into my head. And the opposite would then also happen, where I go, this is pretty fucking like pretentious or whatever, and then all the things that are great about it would start to flood into my head. So I just was going in circles, and I said, here's all I know. Whether or not other people like it, it does feel like we made what we were trying to make. Whether that resonates with people, time will tell. Yeah. Whether reviewers like it, whether players like it, whether there's overlap there. But it does feel like we can't fall back on, well, we ran out of time, we ran out of this, Sony intervened and messed with it. It was like, nope, Sony had our back. Everyone at that game company bled everything they had into the game. I put everything I had into the game. Nobody dropped the ball in terms of just dedication. And whether that was going to add up to something other people liked, we didn't know, but I felt uncompromised. And the one little telltale sign that I had was, right, technically going back a couple months before that, I had been playing it in my studio. My dev kit was hooked into my computer system where I wrote the music. So I had these big, nice studio monitors that I was playing the game through. And it always sounded great, especially as the mix was getting closer and closer to finish. The live orchestra was now added into the game, all that kind of stuff. And the Steve Johnson sound design was like maximally polished. And I remember always thinking like, man, the mix on this game is just really coming together. This is awesome. And then I had this thought, you know, I should play this on like super generic consumer gear just to do one last check. So I took my dev kit home for the first time in 3 years and plugged it into, I had a Sony Bravia TV, and I plugged it right in and routed it to like the little speakers that are on the TV itself. So no frills. And I sat down and I was like, we were at the point where you're in the bug fixing mode. So you're not able to make any major changes. It's just like, here's a little tweak. And for me, it was going to be audio levels, or I found a cue that didn't trigger for the right way or whatever, that kind of thing. And so my then wife, who had been hearing about Journey for 3 years, but had never really seen it, I said, hey, do you want to sit and check out this game? It's only about an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm just going to take notes on my laptop to send last little, you know, finicky things that I find. But you can finally see what I've been talking about for literally 3 years. And so she sat on the couch next to me when I did a complete top to bottom playthrough, and she was to my right and the laptop was to my left. So I kind of forgot she was there, and I kept just turning over, typing things to the left, go back to the game, play through it. And I was playing it in a very meticulous way. Finally, end credits start to roll. I finished my last note and I was like, oh yeah, I wonder what she thinks. I turn over and she was swollen, ugly, crying, a complete mess. Like, it wasn't like wipe a tear and go, wow, that was really touching or whatever. It was like it was like, you know, it's like Schindler's List or something. She had this devastated reaction, and I hadn't hit send on the email. And so then I finished and I wrote something like, based on what I've just witnessed, we might actually have something here.
Wow.
Because I couldn't synthesize that reaction myself. No. I was too aware. I was too busy looking for the bugs and doing all this stuff.
I think that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
If I may, and I'm going to have to bounce shortly after this, a friend of mine is a great producer and a dear friend, Wayne Miller, and I may have shared this with you guys before, talked about the archetypes of the creative process. And he said, does this sound familiar if I talked about this? You have the madman.
110 episodes, dude. I don't fucking know anymore.
Right. You have the madman.
Is this 110? Are we live
I don't
right
know.
now?
I don't think so.
Is this a stream?
I was eating for our 110th episode.
Well, you vomited for 100, so.
That I gotta up it up. I'm gonna take a shit on 120. So here we go. You have the madman, the architect, the builder, and the judge. And he says the madman's responsibility is to just have the ideas, as crazy as they are, untether, just go, get them out. Then the architect is the one who can come up with the plan for those crazy ideas. And then the builder is the one that actually executes that. And then finally you have the judge. And the judge is the one who can sit back and go, hey, this is a good idea or not. And the task, the challenge is to not jump between those four roles before it's time, you know?
When you're working on a team, you can outsource those jobs. So there's probably is, I would assume Alanah has someone whose role is to be the judge, to use your analogy, and to be the kind of external kind of feedback loop.
That is
true.
I
I know that, like, as we've grown as a company, my job has been increasingly to stop being the madman. I started by not being the builder. Now I'm no longer the architect. I'm just about giving up the madman role. Like that's something that as a company grows, you kind of you find different people. You find better madmen, better architects, and better builders. But you still have to be the judge.
The game that you're making is actually building the studio.
I asked Tim Schafer what his biggest piece of advice on video game writing would be the other day, and he said, own the studio.
Yeah, he's right. That has been my genuinely my go-to
Let me tell you about this idea called Kickstarter.
There is a direct, I've definitely said this before, 100% there is a direct correlation between the seniority of writers in a company.
True, but he's head of the studio. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Seniority of writers in the dev team is the biggest predictor to the quality of writing and like how much power you give the writers. Like if you think about the Naughty Dogs,
Santa Monica Studios, fantastic.
Tim Schafer's, Santa Monica Studios. If there is someone in a senior role who's a writer, their games are better written. Like it's just because so often story historically in games has been something you outsource or you get some people to do at the end.
It's a fix for shit that went wrong in level design or whatever. Yeah.
The more power writers have in the team, the better the stories are. And the ultimate cheat mode is to own the studio.
It's like I'll work on that, Tim. I'll work on that.
As long as
one day.
the lead writer is a skilled writer,
Tim
as
Schafer.
opposed to
How
just
dare
having
you throw shade at me on this podcast.
No.
Troy,
what I'm saying is you
110
are.
episodes.
But there's a lot of people who have just kind of been grandfathered in that position. They have seniority because of time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's
they'll pick up a pen and they've got final draft, as opposed to
people get creative director roles without any of the creative experience because they've been around for a long time. That's a whole mess.
Yeah.
And I will say that I'm sure I've said this before, but it drives me nuts industry-wide of every different facet of the industry that I've worked in is people being promoted into manager positions who are bad managers. My manager at Sony is so good because he's had training. It's like, wow, none of the others ever had.
Well, and there's a lot of people
often
that
don't get training at all.
Yeah.
Like, they often be. I only got it when I moved into a management role before I had the company back when I was a design manager at another studio. I had to go to my boss and be like, I'm shit at this. Can I have some training, please?
Creatives are not good managers.
Yeah.
No.
They're great creatives, but they're not good managers.
It's a whole other thing.
They can be if you learn. If you create opportunities for them to be taught, it can work, as Alana's saying.
It's also that some companies have full-time managers, people whose job it is to manage people who don't also do other shit, which is like, wow, what a heaven. Wild.
We're just starting to bring in some leads that do that, and it's fascinating.
Look at you. Are you still consider yourself indie, Mike? Look at you and your big growing team.
There's so many reasons I feel comfortable using that word these days.
Look at you
but
go.
It's cool. It's a lot of responsibility. It's scary, but
but congrats though. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Oh, appreciate it.
But
crucially, writers in charge.
I love how something about you putting this thermos or whatever to your mouth really makes it clear you have to leave.
Guys, I've got to go and fill this. I got to fill this thermos.
I've already filled it. You just don't want to
later. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Wait.
It's such Anyway, very funny.
I don't know. This probably isn't a 110. We should do that live. We'll figure it out. I don't know. Thanks for watching, everybody.
It's been a hot minute.
Should I check?
This is 109B. That's what this is.
Is it 109? I don't know.
109 plus tax.
Yeah.
Let me check. I'll do it quick.
It's a leap episode.
Okay, we are 110. Shit.
Oh. Now I know what to label it.
Well,
This is
shit.
109B.
109B. Let's try and figure out live next week if we can. Maybe we'll
Yep.
figure it out. All right. Thank you for watching, everybody. I'm Alanah Pearce. I'm a video game writer. That's Troy Baker. He's a video game actor. That's Mike Bithell. He's a video game director. And that's Austin Wintry. He's a video game composer. We'll see you next week, and I'll figure it out if we can do it live. Okay.